Hi, James. Good evening. Um, there's a lot of interest in magic. So we hear people talking a lot about magic. Can you explain a little bit what is the difference between magic or black magic and with the magic that you do?
Well, the difference between wholesome magic and black magic is intention. It's power, it's neutral. Magic is that which develops power. And if you were to ask me whether electricity is good or bad, I would say, well, it depends, doesn't it? It depends whether it's doing good or bad work. It's the same with nuclear energy. If it's creating a source of heating and lighting for ordinary people, then it seems to be a good thing. But if it's actually used for nuclear war, then it's not. So it depends what you use power for. There's nothing fundamentally good or bad about power itself. Why we think of magic sometimes as black is mainly because of popular fiction. People who've not really had any access to the real deal, they're going to see magic on television and movies, and they're going to see that it's used mostly to depict the power over quality, the bullying, the dominance, that use of magic to gain an advantage over someone else against their will. That's how it's used in fiction. And you have some people that know a little bit more may know the name Aleister Crowley, a very enigmatic figure, and you could see him as dark. Some of his work isn't as good. It depends how you see it. And certain magicians in history have developed a bad reputation, but other ones have developed a good reputation. Mostly, I would say magic is used for good purposes, because all of the healing arts, including pharmaceutical medicine, all of that includes elements of magical practice. So all in all, mostly magic is used for healing. And it's not black. That's a silly idea.
But isn't that strange or even nonsense? I mean, magic, imagining that you do magic. How is it relevant for ordinary life?
Well, anything appears strange if it's unfamiliar, and most people have not taken the trouble to familiarize themselves with the fundamental principles of magic and the words that are used. But there's a very, very wide, strong overlap between traditional magic and modern psychology. For example, it was Jung that introduced the modern era to the idea of the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And these have been known for a very long time indeed. And they've been kept alive and in use mainly in magical practices. And now, in the last century, they've been commonplace. And it's very helpful to have a sense of the nature of reality. Magic is strange only because people have not familiarized with themselves with the words. But the actual practices are common. They're really common. There's no difference really between magic and prayer. And people, when they really need something and they can't really control it, then they would pray. Well, that's the same as magic. It's just that it's very specific and particular. It's a form of prayer. And what is prayer but aligning with a higher sense of who we are? We're not necessarily calling upon an external force. We could be, but we're not necessarily doing that. We're just tuning in to a higher force within ourselves. And we do this all of the time. Not necessarily every day, but if we have to do something special. Let's take a job interview or a date or something like that. Then we would dress up in our best clothes, and we would speak with a great deal of awareness, and we would say certain words and leave other words out. We would certainly present ourselves with a glamour. And that's the fundament of creating a magical spell, is the use of glamour. We do it all of the time, and we call it something else. It's not strange at all. It's really everyday and ordinary. And once you understand what you're doing, you can use it for all sorts of purposes. I use it in the garden if I'm actually finding it difficult to lift the wheelbarrow because it's so heavy. I have a magical practice for making me a little bit stronger in the moment. And there's nothing changed in my physical body because of saying this magical spell. It's just that I've focused the mind very much more clearly, and that focus of mind develops the grit necessary to become a bit stronger when I need to be. So it is very definitely useful in everyday purposes.
Do you have to have special talents?
Well, yes, of course you have to have special talents. Everything requires certain ability that we develop by the practice of that thing. One of the talents that we develop is the focus of the mind. Magic is all about that. It's all about using the mind as powerfully, as fully as it can possibly be used. And this includes the development of knowledge. So we study and we work on that, and we learn new languages, the names apply to various magical techniques. We study that knowledge. And by studying the knowledge of a thing, the words of a thing, the language of a subject, we learn the subject. That's how it all works. So yes, we develop that talent. We develop the talent of creating an atmosphere. So that's a more feminine ability. We can use our mind and our tricks of the trade to create a very special atmosphere. And within that atmosphere, the mind is focused on a higher level of ability. So the mind rests normally. It uses a minimum level of focus for most things. We just cruise along in a relaxed way until we need to do something. And then we focus up to the level of need. And what we're doing with magic, we're taking that level to a higher state. So we're saying, when we do magic, we need to focus at the best level that we can. And that's because we both create the atmosphere, which is different, is special. And we do this very often with ritual. That's why we've got all these mystical things, the tools and the crystals and the incense and the candles and the tarot cards and the special words and maybe the clothes that we wear and so on. We move ourselves into a state of being by becoming familiar with these things in the first place, and then picking up on that familiarity when we use those things again. And that trains us that we're in a certain state of being. And in that state of being, it's a lot easier indeed to get into a heightened ability of mind, to focus the mind clearly. And that's basically what the processes of magic enable us to do, is to focus the mind clearly. And all the mystery and the mysticism and the mystique, that's to help us do that. When we create that atmosphere, we know we're telling ourselves, look, this is special, take it seriously, move yourself into the higher state of being. It's just how we do it. And this is not at all different from a sportsman or even a businessman and an actor. They move themselves into the state of being necessary to do that job with their tricks. We're using it all of the time in a different way.
Is magic something that it's better to do in secret?
Yes, some people like to keep magic secret, and this is useful for a while to protect us from those forces that would act against us. If nobody knows what we're doing, then they can't really act against us. But after a while, the reverse process may be better, to actually make it really known what you're doing and declare it. And this is because that indicates and therefore develops a high level of self-confidence. To practice magic without self-confidence is really foolish. Well, unless you're just learning, but even then it's best to do that in the company of somebody who is very confident. Because confidence and faith and power, they're all tied up together. And if you have no confidence to use this, to control this power, then you should be very careful. It's just like giving an axe to a child. You wouldn't do that because the child has not the power and the confidence and the knowledge to use that axe safely. So you don't practice your magic unless you know what you're doing. And to know what you're doing, then you train with somebody who already knows, who's trained with somebody else, and so on. And so you learn the thing properly. And this is something which a lot of people don't get. They think they can just do it by reading a book or inventing it in their own imagination. And I doubt whether that's safe, let alone useful. You have to train. It's a very high level skill. And if you don't learn from somebody who has that skill, then you'll miss out on some of the important details. You have to protect yourself. You have to be safe. And you have to be clear to make an impact on the world, or you're wasting your time. And this is subtle. There's 100 tricks in magic, and you have to know them to do this safely and effectively.